so everything's up and we're live, I guess.
Are we ready?
Yeah.
Did I hear yes? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. It is 6:41 by my time. I will call the April 13, 2021 regular meeting of the Franklin County Planning Commission meeting to order. Before we get to the meeting, I will turn things over to staff to discuss meeting format.
Thank you, Chair. Tonight's meeting will be conducted through an online virtual meeting platform. Planning commissioners and staff are joining us remotely in order to comply with Governor Inslee's Proclamation 20.28.14 as it relates to the Open Public Meeting Act during the COVID-19 state of emergency. Should an individual planning commissioner become unexpectedly disconnected, please rejoin the meeting at your first opportunity. The record will reflect your attendance. The meeting will be paused for up to 10 minutes to address technical difficulties. If they cannot be resolved within 10 minutes, the meeting will proceed so long as a quorum of planning commissioners are present. Please activate your mute button at the bottom of your computer screen when not speaking. As a reminder, if you are watching the meeting on YouTube Live and wish to comment or need clarifications on a public hearing item, please send us an email at planninginquiry, all one word, at co.franklin.wa.us before the public comment period closes. Once public comment period has closed on said item, comments will not be included as part of the discussion.
Will the planning staff please call roll and announce whether or not we have a quorum?
Claude Parrott.
Yes.
Mike Vincent.
Yes.
Leighton Lowe. Mike Corrales.
Here.
Roger Link.
Present.
Kent McMullen.
Here.
Melinda Didier. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Okay. Will staff in attendance please introduce yourselves?
I'm Derek Broughton. I'm the Director of Planning and Building for Franklin County.
I'm Aaron Gunderson. I'm the Planner 1 at Franklin County.
I'm Rebecca Gillian. I'm the Franklin County Planning and Building and Services Administrator.
Good evening. My name is Nicole Stickney. I work for AHBL, and I am the on-call planning consultant for Franklin County.
And this is Jen Johnson, a civil attorney for Franklin County.
Okay. I will now lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Since you see a flag there behind Roger.
Yeah.
There's one there, Aaron, okay?
Yeah.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting.
Mr. Chair, this is Commissioner Lake. I move that we approve the agenda for April 13th, 2020.
And do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Which one said that? Was that you?
This is Commissioner Vincent.
Vincent. Okay, Mike. Okay, all in favor? We don't need it. We don't have any changes. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Okay. I'll turn things briefly over to our staff host, who will go over the ground rules for tonight's hearing.
Yeah. So here are the ground rules for tonight's virtual WebEx meeting. All speakers will be called upon individually during the public testimony portion of the hearing, giving their name for the audio record, as well as if they are in favor, neutral, or against the proposal. Please mute your audio when you're not speaking. All comments and questions shall be addressed to the Planning Commission and should be relevant to the application and not be of a personal nature. Each speaker shall have 5 minutes to provide testimony. Please avoid repetitive comments. If there are a large number of speakers who are part of a group or organization, please select a representative to speak on behalf of the group. And behavior such as clapping, booing, hissing, or remarks is prohibited. Every citizen here tonight shall have the opportunity to testify without such distractions.
Are there any questions regarding public hearing ground rules? Okay, hearing none. Turning for a moment to our commission members, let us keep in mind that we are prohibited by law from communicating with members of the public on subject matter of these hearings, except in these hearings. We also may not participate in a decision which there is an appearance of conflict of interest to the average person. So let us take a minute to consider as to the matters which are before us for hearing today. Whether we had any extra parte communications, whether we have any ownership interest in properties, whether we have any business dealings with the proponents or opponents of the matters, or whether we have business associates or immediate family who may be either benefited or harmed by decision in these matters. Are there any commission members who have a declaration at this time regarding any of the items on the agenda?
Mr. Chair, I believe that this would only pertain to item 1 on our agenda this evening. Staff can, not that I have a conflict, but I just want to make sure that we're all aware that it should impact only item 1, since item 2 has to do with not a specific zone change, but a change to ordinance that the county administrators would change regarding our code. Staff can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's pretty much correct. I mean, yeah, okay, I'm not muted. I would concur with that the declarations because they're site specific, unless there's a scenario where a party is proposing to submit a planned unit development to the county in the near term, that would benefit from this change. I guess that could technically be a conflict, but I'm assuming nobody here is looking to do that in the near future. So, yeah.
So there's
Anybody have anything to declare?
no conflict tonight.
No conflict.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience this evening who would object to any commission member hearing any of the items on the agenda?
Here, let me. So we got James Hales here. Do you have any questions regarding?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. Cool.
No questions?
Nope.
Okay. The order of the hearings shall be as follows. Planning staff shall provide a staff report. The commission may ask questions of staff. The applicant or applicant's representative presentation. Public testimony for, against, or neutral regarding the project. Final staff comments, clarification of public statements that occurred during the testimony portion of the public hearing, close to the public hearing, and planning commission discussion of the proposed actions. Are there any procedure questions before we begin the public hearing? Okay, item 1.
Sorry to interrupt real quick. I think we do need to discuss whether or not the applicant wants to go ahead with only 5 of you present when it requires a vote of 4 people to pass a recommendation.
Is this Jen talking?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, my county computers were not working tonight, so I'm on my phone.
Okay.
I know the feeling. So, did you guys understand the applicant, Mr. Stromstad? These are both your items. Are you okay to proceed? with just 5 members?
Yeah, proceeding with the understanding that it requires 4 votes, either for or against, to provide a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. If there's not 4, then there's no recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, and the item gets pushed to the Board of County Commissioners with just the facts of this is the staff report, staff recommendations, and there were hypothetically 3 against it, or 3 for it and 2 against it. If that's the process, then we don't have to table the matter. Yes, we're okay with moving forward.
And Jen, I'm assuming that would be the approach.
Yes, I would recommend we follow that same approach. It seemed to have worked well today, until we fix that situation in our bylaws down the road.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Item 1 is a public hearing for file sub 2021-01. It is a proposal to allow for the development of a single-family residential subdivision comprising 3 parcels, 126-190-070, 126-190-071, and 126-190-072, and approximately 10.11 acres, and creating 9 1-acre lots. The area where a project is proposed has a zoning designation of rural community, or rural community 1, which is RC1, with a comprehensive plan designation of rural shoreline development. Staff, are there additional people logging in seeking to comment on this matter?
Not that I can wear. I mean, basically, it's just James Hales there. The other folks that I message haven't shown up. So,
Okay. Then I will declare the public hearing for SUB 2021-01 to be open at 6:53 my time. May we have a staff present the staff report, please?
oh, yep. And I got to get. Yeah. So, Nicole, you're muted. But yeah, I just transferred the.
Thank you. Once again, my name is Nicole Stickney, and I'll be presenting on behalf of staff tonight. And I have some slides I'll be broadcasting to share with you as I make my presentation. As the chairman announced, this is a preliminary plat application for a subdivision that's known as Columbia Bluff. Oops. The applicant and owners are Big Sky Development, LLC, and their engineer, Mr. Caleb Stromstad, is representing them this evening. The proposal is to subdivide 3 parcels. All of the parcels together comprise 10.11 acres, and there's going to be 9 lots created as a result. The surrounding area is primarily agricultural. There's some residential uses as well. And as it was mentioned, this is in the rural shoreline development area of Franklin County as designated on the comprehensive plan land use map. And accordingly, the zoning at this location is RC1. That's a residential designation with a 1-acre minimum lot size. The description of the location is shown here, and it was also included in your staff report. This is in Farm Unit 86, Irrigation Block 1 of the Columbia Basin Project. And I've included also the legal descriptions for the parcel numbers that I'm showing on the screen now. Those were read aloud a few minutes ago by the chairman. If you're not familiar with the location, this is south of Sagemore Road, and it lies east of Columbia River Road. The parcels, 3 parcels as they now exist, are outlined in red faintly, but as you can see, it fronts along Columbia River Road and then further up behind and further to the east, it does slope upwards here. There are some homes on very large lots behind. The proposal includes on-site wells, on-site septic services. Irrigation water would be contracted through South Columbia Basin Irrigation District. Power would come from BBEC, and this is within the Pasco School District service area. This is an exhibit showing the proposed preliminary plat, so it shows you the basic layout. I do want to call out that the north arrow points to the left-hand side of the page, so this is oriented sideways. It's easier to see this way. And as you can tell, there are 9 lots proposed, and the access is shown. It'll come out from Columbia River Road on the south end of the plat, move further to the east, and then run north and south to provide access to all of the lots. This was subject to SEPA environmental review. It wasn't the number of lots that triggered that review, but it was the grading, because there is quite a bit of grading and earth movement that's proposed for this site. It is a steep slope, and they're going to have to do a lot of earthwork. So because of that, it was subject to SEPA review. The department did issue a determination of non-significance, and there were 7 mitigation measures as outlined in your report. Quickly, what they were covering was recommendations for earthwork that are contained in a geotechnical report. Those need to be adhered to. Construction stormwater pollution prevention plan needs to be provided with measures to mitigate for potential erosion. Next, we're requiring that best management practices minimizing dust during construction be used. And vegetative cover needs to be provided as soon as possible after that clearing happens to mitigate against dust in the event of a windy day like we experienced today. Next, if archaeological materials or human remains are observed during project activities, work needs to stop. And we've provided kind of an inadvertent discovery plan for that in terms of who would need to be contacted. Fifth, a drainage system needs to be designed and in order to capture and dispose of the stormwater runoff, and it needs to be contained on site. Next, we've detailed that a separate source of irrigation water needs to be implemented and provided throughout the life of the project in order to mitigate groundwater withdrawals. What we don't want is water being taken from those exempt wells and being used for landscaping. And so that's why that irrigation requirement is required under SEPA. And finally, no more than 5,000 gallons per day may be withdrawn from the groundwater to serve the entire development. There's going to be a requirement for a note to be placed on the face of the plat regarding this limitation. So again, those are just a brief look at the 7 mitigation measures under SEPA. I also need to highlight that the original SEPA determination was appealed by the Pasco School District. That is why you're hearing this item tonight. We were scheduled to go forward with everything about 2 weeks ago, but once they issued their appeal, it took a little time to work things out. In the meantime, the Pasco School District has withdrawn their appeal. They have reached a mitigation agreement with the developer, and it is separate from this county review. And just to be clear, any of the mitigation fees that are collected for schools as a result of that agreement will not be collected by or enforced by Franklin County. Just want to make that clear. And also, we did receive some comments, and I'll get back to those in a few slides here, but I wanted to call out, there was a SEPA comment from the Department of Archaeological and Historic Preservation, and they have recommended a professional archaeological study in consultation with the tribes. Next, I just wanted to be clear about access. As I showed you on the slide showing the layout, the proposed plat will cause for the removal of an existing gravel road. There's a gravel road that runs directly parallel to Columbia River Road, and so that will be removed. And I'm just going to go up real quick and just show where that is. This gravel road, it's going to be removed, and then the access, as I showed earlier, is going to be realigned up to the top. So basically, you'll be driving up, and if you have a home in this development, your driveway will go down the hill, and you'll have your view of the river there. So that's the scheme for access. The access to the site is via Columbia River Road, so there won't be any access off of Sagemore, and the access point is as far south as possible to prevent any conflicts with Sagemore, and not too close to that curve that occurs with Columbia River Road further north. I'm going to quickly summarize some of the agency comments that we received. I think they're important. I haven't put all the details here, but these are the high points. So first, Public Works has detailed that the recommendation that no lot may have direct access to Columbia River Road or to West Sagemore Road. They've commented that private access roads need to be built to Franklin County design standards. And next, the developer, they'd like them to provide traditional residential landscaping material between the property line and the edge of pavement with Columbia River Road, the right-of-way, and that will assist in weed control. That's both along Columbia River Road and West Sagemore Road, any part of that facility that the lots may touch. South Columbia Basin Irrigation District also provided comments. They noted that currently the lands within the proposed subdivision don't have irrigation water allotments. If irrigation water is desired, a municipal and industrial water service contract must be obtained. So that's work that the developers group will need to pursue. There was a long letter, as we usually get from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. I don't want to pretend I'm capturing all of their comments. They're in your packet, but I did want to highlight that they've noted that any potential runoff can't enter reclamation lands or facilities. And that's a standard comment that they make. Health District did a review. They've been quite busy, but they got a review in time for this to be heard. They did specify that all of the lots need to be a minimum of 1 acre. And furthermore, all of those lots need to contain a minimum of 21,780 square feet of usable land. That's after easements and encumbrances. They also don't let slopes over 20% be calculated in that minimum requirement. Each lot needs to be configured to allow a 100-foot water radius water supply protection zone. And a 100-foot protection zone must be established around each proposed well site. That basically means you can't put your septic system close to your well. They need to be separated. Proposed on-site sewage disposal system, initial and reserve systems must be designated on the plat for lots 8 and 9. I think they just called those out because those might be a little trickier. And they've also specified what particular statements are required to be placed on the plat. Big Bend Electrical Corporation did not have any comments. These are the comments now from the planning department. Again, this is a summary, but we noted that the entire site contains critical erosion hazard areas for the county's erosion and landslide hazard map. And we looked at the topographical map, which confirms the presence of these steep slopes. Next, we noted that this property is near a flood zone and there's steep slopes. When we looked at the previous short plat that had been approved in 2018, creating these 3 lots now that we're considering, there was a note about that proximity to the FEMA flood zone and addressing stormwater retention requirements. The short plat also contained a note requiring separation standards for all structures for fire protection. And so, we wanted to bring forth these notes because if they were put on a plat previously, we believe they should be carried forward. And finally, when we reviewed their geotechnical reports that were submitted, we believe that those recommendations for foundation designs need to be adhered to. Specifically including the listed recommended measures for residential structure footings, concrete slabs on grade, and retaining walls as listed in the report and its addendums. However, we're not recommending that recommendations for pavement sections be required. We feel like that should be at the developer's option and discretion. Again, the Public Works Department did say that that private access road would need to be built to county standards. So I don't know how those compare, but we're being really clear about what's required, what's not. We received a public comment via email. That comment came in on March 21st, 2021. It was from Sharon Bailey and Andy Pritchard. And I'll read their comment. They said we would not be in favor of this subdivision. They listed the file number. And they said without seeing a funded plan for upgrading the Columbia River Road infrastructure, considering this request, the previous Big Sky request, and the Harker request, we continue to be concerned about increases in traffic and lack of support to this neighborhood. These three efforts will significantly increase the population in this area, but we see no plans for increased fire, sheriff, or other infrastructure support. There are open ditches, no bike lanes, no fog lines, and this is a high-speed road. We are also concerned about the lack of flash flood abatement down the slope of Columbia River Road. So again, just wanted to enter in those public comments for the record. Now, there were 2 SEPA comment letters that we received after the report was prepared. So I wanted to enter those into the record. The first being a letter that I alluded to earlier from the State Historic Preservation Office and jointly also the Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation. They made some notes, and then likewise the Department of Ecology wrote a 3-page letter that was dated March 24th of this year. I just put everything into a table to keep it real clear. So as a reminder, again, the Pasco School District, they did file an appeal on the SEPA determination due to a lack of mitigation for schools. That has subsequently been withdrawn, so there's really no action or next step to take on that. In terms of the Department of Archaeology Historic Preservation, if you read through their letter, they've described that their predictive model that they use indicates a high probability of encountering cultural resources. And they say this has a lot to do with the proximity to the river. Additionally, the project falls in the Hanford South Archaeology District, and they're saying that the scale of any ground disturbance that's being proposed would destroy any resources. They're saying that there's just so much grading that's proposed here that it would be too late to save anything once you discovered, you're digging something up. Because of that, they highly advised that the county require a professional archaeological survey, and they've also recommended tribal consultation. And finally, Ecology's letter talked to 4 specific programs. It was kind of an FYI letter. They talked about the hazardous waste and toxics reduction program that has to do with construction materials. They talked about their toxic cleanups program in relation to the fact that this has been used previously for agriculture. There could be toxic chemicals as a legacy of that use. They talked about their water quality program as it pertains to protection of groundwater and stormwater mitigation requirements. And then finally, they talked about their water resources program, and that's in relation to exempt wells and limitations on withdrawal per state law. And they also quoted some case law in regards to that. So all of that information has been provided, and the applicant has the information as well. I'll move on now to our recommendation. Staff does recommend approval of this application with the findings and facts and conditions of approval that we've detailed in our staff report. Just to highlight, there are 6 standard findings of fact that we review. That's in Franklin County Code 16.20.070. The statements are listed here, and in your staff report, it goes into a lot more detail, and we have subpoints on these various 6 items. And also the conditions of approval are listed there, and some of them are very standard, and then others of them are particular to some of the items that I've brought to you this evening. We do have one suggested change, and that's based on the letter that came from DAHP. It came in after we prepared the staff report. So we are recommending a modification to the 3rd finding of fact, and that is to add onto number 3, which has to do with public use and interest being served by the proposed subdivision. We're suggesting that sub-item number C, or letter C, should be added, and that would state that archaeological or cultural resources could be present on the property, and a professional survey will provide adequate measures to ensure the public interest in the resources may be identified if present. And to that end, because we always try to match up our findings with our conditions, we propose to add a 7th condition to this proposal, and staff is recommending the following. A professional archaeological survey of the project area shall be conducted prior to ground disturbing activities, and the survey report must be provided to the county staff for submittal to DAHP. So there's those two changes that we're proposing. And I did not include, I apologize, a suggested motion in your packets, but here it is on the slide for your use should you agree with staff's recommendation. We have written this out, but also have some verbiage so that you can address the addition of finding of fact number 3C and the conditional approval number 7, which would just be added into the record along with the other items that are in your staff report. Thank you for the opportunity to present this evening.
Okay, does any commissioner have any questions of staff?
Mr. Chair, this is Commissioner Lake. I do have a question for Ms. Dickney.
Go ahead.
My recollection is that an applicant, when there's an appeal of the SEPA determination, can seek approval or reversal of that appeal from the county commissioners. Is that recollection correct?
When a SEPA appeal comes in, depending on the nature of it, we notify the applicant. In this case, we let the applicant know that the SEPA appeal had been received. We provided a copy, and we asked the applicant, do you want us to proceed? And if so, it would bypass, I believe, I never did quite verify this, but my understanding was that had they not worked out the appeal, the matter would have gone directly to the Board of County Commissioners. And that's because the Board of County Commissioners, per Franklin County Code, hears SEPA appeals, not the Planning Commission. And so they would have to hear both items in a joint hearing. So they would have heard the subdivision request and the SEPA appeal together in one hearing. However, the applicant said, no, we don't think we'll need to do that. Let us talk to the school district. So they talked to the school district, they came to an agreement. Again, Franklin County is not party to that agreement, but as a result of that agreement, the school district withdrew their SEPA appeal. And so we were able to carry on presenting this to you this evening.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, does the applicant or the applicant's representative wish to speak?
Yes, Caleb Stromstead, Docter Engineering, representing Big Sky Developers. We thanks everybody for being here. I have a couple points I'd like to go to. I'll be as brief as possible. We'll start out with some technical changes that we request on the conditions. If you could turn to condition 3, it's on page 83 of your packet. The first change is in regards to condition 3B and 3C from the Benton Franklin Health District letter.
83?
Just to clarify.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Did you say page 83?
He's probably using the old version.
I have the old version up and there's only 77 pages.
Oh, that's so on when I downloaded the agenda or the packet for this meeting, it didn't have the Columbia Bluff information, so I just printed out the 331. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
So we're looking at different packets.
No, it's the numbering is what's different. So in ours, it's 15, page 15 of 77 in the packets prepared for this evening, the versions from this evening.
Okay, that's what I needed. Thank you.
All right, so you'll have to help me out, Derek, on those references moving forward. Okay, so the condition is condition 3, the Benton Franklin Health District, and really this is just a verbatim regurgitation of their letter. Between B and C, there should be an or. Thanks, Derek. matrix letter reads, each lot must be configured to allow a 100-foot radius water supply protection zone to sit within the lot lines, or a 100-foot protection zone must be established around each proposed well site. Kind of not for tradition, but that or is important in that.
And I apologize, I misquoted. It's page 17 and the B and C, 3B and C of page 17 in our packet tonight, the version this evening.
And any questions on that, I'd be happy to answer. Here, none. The next one would be on condition number 6.
Which is the following
Which should
page.
be just in the following page, thanks. 6B. I just caught this tonight while Nicole was giving her presentation. So 6B, the following language shall be listed on the final plat under notes. In addition to the fire separation standards and the park dedication fees noted on the reference short plat. So there's an underlying short plat with conditions. The fire separation standards listed on that short plat don't apply to our plat. And so we would like that stricken completely. The fire separation notes on the underlying short plat, what they're for is in the county, the fire code, if you don't have fire suppression and your lots are 2 acres or greater, you can be exempt from having a 20,000 gallon fire tank on site if you have increased setbacks. And that's exactly what that short plat lists. Those are increased setbacks. What we're proposing is 1 acre. So this plat has to have that tank. And I've talked with Mike Harris of the fire department in the civil design plan. So I want to make sure that's cleared. Nicole or Derek, you have any questions on that?
So you guys are actually putting in the 20,000 gallon system.
We have to. There's no other option.
Well, I mean, unless you were putting in fire hydrants, but you don't have the water system for that. So
Correct. The next one is in regards to the last bullet of 6B. I know that's a direct copy from the underlying short plat, but I believe that 1,000-year storm reference is the typo, and it should be a 100-year storm. And we'd like clarification on that because I'm not
I
quite
believe
sure
you
how
are
to design
correct.
a 1,000-year storm.
I don't know that we planned to that. I will double check just to make sure. And if not, we'll let you know because you'll need to know what that design and engineering refers to. So we'll confirm that and we'll let you know. But I agree. I believe it's 100-year. I've never heard of us planning for a 1,000-year storm event. But I could be wrong. So I got to double check that but I'm pretty sure FEMA flood zone maps primarily do 100-year. That said, a 1,000-year storm event, usually the longer the number, the lower the requirements. So you may want a 1,000-year storm event.
If there's a 1,000-year storm, this subdivision is going to be the least of everyone's worries.
I would agree. But yeah, we'll confirm that, and we'll look into that and make sure on that before it goes to the board for sure, and we'll coordinate with the applicant.
Okay. Those 3 comments, I don't think there's any disagreement from staff, just some technical errors that we wanted corrected for the record. And so it's corrected when it goes to the Board of County Commissioners that it's formatted correctly. My last item is regarding the inadvertent discovery protocol and the cultural resources survey that Nicole talked about towards the end. And I wanted to give the Planning Commission a little bit of backstory about the Department of Archaeological and Historical preservation letters. Nicole, are you able to pull up that letter?
Yes, I'll do that.
So while that letter is being pulled up, went back into our records on some previous projects, and the first one I found was December 2019, when the Department of Archaeological, or just call them DAP, Department of Archaeological and Historical Preservation, started commenting on SEPA, and they use what they refer to as a predictive model. And their predictive model, if you go onto it, pretty much lets all of Pasco at high. I have the letter in front of me. I'll just read it. Their statewide predictive model, high probability of encountering cultural resources. I don't know the percentage, but it's more than 50% of Pasco is in that swath. This is a form letter, which means it's a boilerplate letter that they default submit when there's a SEPA comment period. On this one in particular, the only thing that is without form is their reference to the Columbia River and the Hanford South Archaeological District. If DAP wanted to, I guess what I'm trying to say is, if they were serious about their request, they would have appealed the SEPA determination, because the SEPA determination strictly says an inadvertent discovery protocol. And what that is the contractor has to have an inadvertent discovery protocol. Everybody on site has to know, if we hit something of cultural significance, this is the plan, these are the people you call, and it's a standard construction note to put on a site like this. A cultural research survey, which is what the planning staff's recommending, which I understand where they're coming from. They're not experts in this area. DAP recommended this, and they're taking what I believe is a conservative approach, and I believe it's an overreach. So the way this cultural resource survey works is it costs the developer about $10,000, has to hire a local archaeological consultant. They go out there with shovels and they dig, shovel deep, a couple feet, pothole the site, and write a letter that says, we didn't find anything. Here's your inadvertent discovery protocol. If you find anything of significance, these are the stop procedures. In a site like this, I'd like you to just look at this with common sense. There's nothing unique about this site that would lead them to say, I think we should dig a hole here. The site's been blasted with sand for years and years and years. It's unlikely you're going to just uncover anything with a shovel hole. There is going to be mass grading of this site. The way we're going to tier the site is we have the road coming up to the top, and we're basically going to cut about 8 feet off the top, put flat pads, and so you have view lots. So you come up a rather steep drive, and everybody's going to backload, and that way their view lot's going to be unobstructed. Significant grading. There's no way that a cultural resource survey is going to uncover anything, because again, they're only going to go a couple feet deep. The tribes didn't comment on this. Nobody from the state archaeological office is here. Again, this is a form letter. They're asking for freebies. It's a significant cost to the developer, and in my opinion, is a waste of time and money. And so I would ask the Planning Commission to not recommend condition 3C and condition 7 that Nicole proposed for the reasons I stated. I'm happy to answer any questions moving forward on this. The county is the lead agency, and so the SEPA determination is set. This is a plat condition, and we're in Planning Commission as a complete say in your recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners on this item. And I'll give you one more example. If you're familiar with the sand dunes at the intersection of Road 100 and Burns Road, that sand dune was leveled about a year ago. That was this form letter we got from the Department of I keep messing this name up, DAP. They requested the exact same thing. They wanted a cultural resource survey. It's in the highly predictive area for a cultural resource survey, and it's a sand dune, and you're familiar with that area. So just as an example, we are close to the Columbia River, but there needs to be more evidence provided by DAP to require the applicant to spend money and resources on just an ask. So that's my spiel on that. And again, I'm standing by for questions. I'd also ask if there are questions that they be brought up within the public comment period. The last time we had a meeting, there were some significant questions once the public comment period was closed that I would have loved to participate in. So I'd encourage the planning commission members to ask those questions if there's any concerns. Be happy to ask them or answer them. Thank you.
Are there any questions that commissioners have for the applicant? Then let the record show there were no objections.
Wait, are you asking for public testimony, or you're asking?
I'm asking if any of the commissioners had questions for the applicant.
Okay.
Yes, I have a question for staff. This is Commissioner Link.
Okay.
I did not hear a response to, or staff's response to his first issue was, I believe it was item 3C from the health district. And I'd like to hear what staff's response is to his fourth request.
About the ore, the request to put the ore, you talking about the health department?
Yes.
I'll go back and dump,
I
trusting that is the right data. The comment from the health district is the comment from the health district, and we'll correct that off the letter.
So then it must not be 3C that we're talking about, because there's no or in 3C.
Just a second.
Maybe the applicant can ask the question again, or state the issue.
No, but that or was supposed to be added.
So in the health department letter, dated March 22nd, 2021, which is page 44 of 77 in the version that was put together for this evening. I believe it's so it's comment. Well, so first it goes through Mr. Greeno, basically outlines, describes the proposal through 5 statements, then states these findings indicate the above referenced plat generally meets our requirements for plats utilizing on-site sewage disposal systems, single-family wells provided. And comment 2 is each lot must be configured to allow a 100-foot radius water supply protection zone to fit within the lot lines, or a 100-foot protection zone must be established around each proposed well site. So due to the fact that this is what the health department wrote, that's what we'll probably need to regurgitate. I mean, we don't. So yeah, I mean, that's the answer.
Okay.
That's what we will require what the health department has required. They require that it's a or situation.
Okay. And then staff's comment on his last request also.
What was that?
Staff's comments on his last request to amend the conditions of approval.
I appreciate where Ms. Stromstad is coming from. I have concerns with regard when I look at the property, it appears to be it's undisturbed ground. It's not like it's active farmland or redevelopment of it. Just so I don't know the last time that property was used. So I would have those concerns. We are, as agents of the county, we're required to reflect that. So our recommendation is still to include that. However, as Mr. Stromstad said, the planning commission is at their discretion regarding these types of recommendations.
Thank you. I have a question. Go ahead. It's Commissioner Vincent. Just a general question about the more information on that egress road. Is that a cul-de-sac to the east of the property off of Columbia River Road? And my understanding is that there's no egress to Sagemore because of that the danger that and the traffic on that curve.
You're correct about no access to Sagemore. We specifically met a few times with the Public Works Department, and they don't even like how close Larkspur Road is to that curve, and they wouldn't entertain an additional intersection at that curve. And I can agree with them, especially not only is there a horizontal curve, but there's a grade change, so you got the slope that limits the sight distance as well. But we don't propose a cul-de-sac with it. We're going to do a hammerhead turnaround as an emergency vehicle turnaround within the proposed private driveway. And we've met with Public Works and the fire marshal regarding it, and they're in agreement with what we're proposing. Does that answer your question, Commissioner Vincent?
Yes. Thanks. I got another question for you regarding the soil condition off that bluff there, and whether there's been any geotech surveys on that regarding regarding that. What kind of soil do you have, and what's the story on any geotech information?
Yeah, good question. So we did a soils report on the Rivercrest subdivision, which is immediately south of here. And we used the same geotech when the health district was out there digging holes for their test pits. And they observed the exact same soil conditions as the top layer of sand with cobbles underneath, which is pretty typical of the riverbed material. And they provided grading specifications, cut and fill, compaction, maximum slope. All of that geotech report in the supplemental letter for this site was provided to the planning commission, or pardon me, planning staff, and those conditions are actually written into some of the conditions here that we would follow those, and we completely intend to.
Thank you. Any more clarification? Is there anyone in favor of this that wants to speak as well?
Well, let me just go with James Hales here, who's the only. Are you there, Mr. Hales?
Yes, my name's James Hales, and I live on Giesler Road. I would like to speak in opposition to the proposal.
Okay, wait.
Well,
Are there any others in favor of
well,
this project?
I like I said earlier, Mr. Hales is the only person that's on the
Okay.
attendee list.
Okay, so let's go to two opponents then.
Yeah.
And thank you. I appreciate what you've already said. That was very informative, and I'm grateful for those reviews and also for the good questions that were asked. I have some significant concerns about the road approach, which would be presented here onto the access on Columbia River Road and the danger that causes. Just over 2 years ago, in 2018, when this piece of land was short platted into 4 lots, and there was an easement made on that 4th lot, which Orozco bought, and you can see that that's where the current temporary access point is. they put that current temporary access point as far away from that curve as they possibly could, and that's why they put an easement on it. So I called and talked with Robin, who is the GIF mapper in the assessor's office, to check on that easement. I also talked with Robert Mendez, who and to find out the setbacks that would have to be. The setbacks on this particular situation and on that curve have to be at least 850 feet, which is possible if it were coming onto that fourth piece of property, which is why they had to move that access point as far south as they could. But in the proposal that's being given, they created a different access point closer to the curve, which would be against that safety. And the other part of the problem is there's only a 10-foot easement on that lot, which wouldn't be enough for 9 homes. It was basically intended to be a driveway for 3 homes when those 3 lots were broken up. Another concern that I have, so a major concern about the safety. I live right there. I come around that corner. You increase it to 9 homes there, you're tripling the capacity of access there, right, coming down that slope and around the blind curve, and you don't have adequate sight distance for what's being proposed here. The second major concern is you have to have an emergency egress. Every subdivision is required to have a second emergency egress, and there's nothing provided here, which is a serious concern. A couple other things that I noticed just as you were going through and discussing this, if there's a minimum square foot, the 21,000 so odd square feet of usable space that excludes easements and also excludes other site provisions, that on-site tank for the fire suppression would have to also take away from that 21,000 square feet. So that's kind of a concern. I would agree with the letter that was presented in concern about the water and the flood. The slope level in this area is a significant one. It can wash debris onto the road. That temporary access point that's currently there is not to code, and it slopes into the road, which causes things to flow down into Columbia River Road. Just some very big concerns, and also the Columbia River Road. Yeah, I measured it. It's 26 feet wide at the largest points, and then it's supposed to be a 4-foot shoulder, but it's not really a shoulder in some of those places there. It just is not a significant tributary to increase that traffic without some major improvements. It's a safety hazard, especially to all of us residents who are already there, coming around this curve and having 9 new homes times 8 trips per home per day. That's 72 trips and access points. It's going to increase accidents. I just really would encourage you to look at this. I think that at 3 lots there, that's sufficient, and I don't think it should be increased to 9. Another kind of concern as you were discussing this, and this is for everybody, I guess, when you talk the proposal, they want to exclude the 3C and the number 7, and Mr. Stromstad said it's a waste of time. If you agree with that, then you're setting a precedent. That's a very significant precedent. Like was stated, this is undisturbed ground, and so you're setting a precedent which will be used in other places. And so I just really be concerned about that. My number one concern though is the safety. I don't think this is a safe choice. I don't think there's adequate sight distance, especially in the proposal where they moved the access point closer to the curve. Whereas it was in 2018, they put it as far away as they possibly could. And it was for that very reason, and there's an easement on that property. So that's basically my comments. I appreciate your time and would encourage you to think carefully about this. Thank you.
All right.
Does the applicant want to address any of this?
Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. Yes, Mr. Hale brought up some great points that I would like to address. I'll start with the road approach concerns. I would agree with Mr. Hale. It's logical that the access point on the original short plat was put as far south as possible. That's exactly the intent of this preliminary plat as well. And the 850-foot curb length that he got from Public Works, I haven't vetted that yet. We typically get into that in design. But if that's accurate, there's over 1,000 feet from that horizontal curve to where our proposed access is. So if that 850 feet minimum distance is what is required for site distance, we more than exceed that. Simple math, the lots are 150 feet wide and you can see 6 lots, which is 900 feet before you get to that curve. So but we will look into that in design. Site distance is a standard thing. So I appreciate that concern. The comment on a second egress is a requirement. That's actually not accurate. The International Fire Code is typically the reference that most jurisdictions use to determine when a secondary egress is required. Off the top of my head, it's around 30. So once you increase 30 units on one access, you either have to sprinkler the buildings or provide a secondary egress. In this case, we're proposing 9, and so we're well below that threshold. So a single egress is within the fire code. The one thing that's that fire tank. I agree. If the fire tank for use for fire suppression was in somebody's yard, that there would naturally be an easement around that, and that easement would be take away from that lot's usable area. Mr. Hale is correct in that, and we've accounted for that. The plan for the fire tank is actually to put it within the road easement. There's room for that, so no concern there. And setting the precedent with DAP, you're absolutely setting the precedent, and we're advocating that you set the precedent in consideration of, applying common sense, applying good reason, recognizing that our state is known for government overreach. They will ask, because most jurisdictions just fold. And this is a form letter, and that's exactly what they're doing. And we're asking that the Planning Commission stands up for property owners and developers and sets the right precedent. And I think that answers all of Mr. Hale's approaches. I can appreciate his concern and appreciate him taking the time tonight to come and speak. But I'm happy to answer any more questions if I was unclear on any of those items.
Okay. So, just though Hales has his hand raised, do you want me to let him speak, or anybody? Yes. Okay.
I appreciate that, Mr. Storms. That I think that at this point, the concerns about that site distance, that should have all been done and presented at this stage. It's not a later stage after approval. It's too late. When those things are already, it needs to be presented at this stage, at the short plot stage. But I appreciate your information about those other things. It's still a significant concern of safety to me, and even at that distance, I think you're approaching minimums is never a safe kind of a thing. But thank you.
Okay. All right.
And one last comment. The easement on the Orozco property exists, and if we need to back up to that, we absolutely can and have the right to do that. We talked about utilizing that access, and we didn't feel like we needed to at this point. And being a good neighbor, let him have his property back. But the easement exists, and it will not be vacated with our final plat. And so, to address those safety concerns, that is still an option. And during design, we still can't use that. So there's a reserve there.
Okay.
Any more clarification?
Mr. Chair, I have a question for staff, but it's probably a Public Works question, but the applicant indicated that the fire tanks will be within the road easement. Is that permissible?
Well, these are underground tanks, correct? Yeah, so it may be in the road easement, but probably not in the lane of travel. We always envision a tank a certain way, but there's many different designs. They could be running them long and thin. The key is, do you got 20,000 gallons that we can pull from? So they could put in a 2-foot wide, 1,000-foot long thing. I don't know what the gallon ratio is, but yeah, it's potentially, if it's going to be a problem, and Mr. Stromstad is correct. Remember, these are preliminary approvals. So sometimes when you get on the ground, you got to tweak things a little bit, and things like that. There's not, the county is not going to allow for an access to be located in a place that's going to be shorter than required. Also, if there was some issue with the tank being placed in the easement, that can be addressed, and there's other potential locations where this could occur. It could even potentially encumber some of the properties. That said, that would be addressed as a last resort. They can encumber a property. They can still pretty much meet everything. These types of things. That's why it's a preliminary approval, the preliminary plat. It's not the final plat. So this will go back to the, basically they go through the process. These are the conditions. We're saying when we approve this, you have a right to proceed as long as you meet these requirements. It's no guarantee the applicant's going to be able to meet the requirements. And if it turns out that they're not, and they need to make a material change in order to do so, then that item has to actually come back to us. Otherwise, they will figure out a way. Right now, the plan is in the road easement. If it turns out that that's not possible, they're not going something else. And if that doesn't work, then they don't get to finalize the plat, and all of this goes out the window.
Okay. But the 21,780 square feet,
Yeah.
that requirement must be met regardless. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So,
Any more clarification?
yeah, it looks like Mr. Hills raised his hand again. Okay. All right.
I just wanted, thank you. I just wanted to make that note and statement that Robin in the GIF mapping said the easement across Roscoe's property is a 10-foot easement. A 10-foot easement may be adequate for 3 lots, but definitely would not be adequate for 9 lots. And again, that just a safety concern. Putting it too close anywhere in there, even on the Roscoe property, is too close and just dangerous. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I've got to clarify this. I have the topo map. It's a 30-foot easement, and they actually have a cul-de-sac turnaround on the Roscoe property with a 55-foot radius. So the 10-foot utility easement is probably what Robin's talking about, which is outside of the 30-foot access easement that goes across the Roscoe property. And I think the topo map we provided it with this, and that includes the Roscoe property, and you can see it for yourself.
Any more clarification? Comments? Okay, hearing none, I will close the public testimony portion of SUB 2021-01. Is there any discussion amongst the planning commission prior to entertaining a motion? Okay, hearing none, then I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, this is Commissioner Ray. I move that the Planning Commission concur with the findings of fact and conditions of approval as detailed in the staff report for case file sub 2021-01 and recommend to the county commissioners approval of the request based on the findings of fact and conditions of approval, with the addition of finding of fact 3C and condition of approval number 7.
Is there a second?
I would second. It's Commissioner Vincent. Second that.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, a point of order, if I may interject.
go ahead.
This is Nicole Stickney. I just wanted to mention that we will also make the corrections to those typos that were identified. So I don't think there's a need to amend the motion, but I just wanted to make that clear that we will correct those typos before they go into the Board of County Commissioners. Thank you.
Okay,
To be safe, I'll go ahead and amend that motion.
go ahead.
Typographical errors be corrected.
Okay, and Commissioner Vincent, you still want to second the amended motion?
Yes, I'd like to second the amended motion.
Okay. Any more discussion? May we have a roll call, please?
Claude Parrott,
Yes.
Mike Vincent,
Yes.
Mike Corrales,
Yes.
Roger Lee,
Yes.
Kent McMullen.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the motion is approved.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to item 2, which is a public hearing for the file TC 2020-02, which is a proposal to amend Franklin County Code Chapter 17.58 Planned Unit Development, PUD, specifically Section 17.58.080, Open Space Requirements. This request seeks to reduce the required open space for PUD from 35 to 15%. I declare the staff, are there any additional people logging in to seek comment on this matter?
There's Mr. Hale's still there, but yeah, other than that, hasn't been anybody else that's logged in.
Say just Mr. Hale?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I declare the public hearing for TC 2020-02 to be open. May we have staff present the staff report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a request that well, pretty much what it says. I mean, this one's pretty straightforward. Currently, right now, the county's planned unit development ordinance 17.58 requires 35% of a developer to set aside 35% of the property as open space. And then that's over a third of a property. Planned unit developments are usually they're strange little animals. They're a type of subdivision, generally speaking, but they can also be other types of arrangements. But what they do is our standard subdivision allows, we create lots and, there's X number of lots and this and that and these amenities and they've got setbacks and all this other stuff. Planned unit developments are a little more, shall we say, artistic. It's basically you've got a lot of land, say 100 acres, but you don't want to arrange it. You don't want to break it up into 100 lots. You want to do something different. I don't know, cottage style housing, but you get these bonuses or allowances based on this kind of give and take between the developer and the jurisdiction that's implementing the PUD or is in authority of the PUD property. a lot of times what that involves is a set aside for property, open space that's accessible by the entire community that's being developed. So it might be a park, it might be well, whatever, just it's an open space. It could be developed, it could just be natural land. But what it does is it allows for things like we have standard setbacks. Maybe you get to deviate from that and create what's known as a zero lot line development. You still get, and you're still limited to the density allowed, but sometimes that open space setback allows you to do even more density. So let's say it's an RC1 property, 100 acres, then you would theoretically have the right to develop 100 lots or 100 units. That's whereas, as you saw in earlier, when you actually develop a subdivision, you usually lose about 20% through infrastructure requirements and stuff like that. So if you got a 100 lot subdivision, you're only going to probably get at best 80 lots on that. Under a PUD situation, you set aside open space, you still may get 100, you'd be permitted to do 100 units, but they'd be designed differently. Obviously, they still have to meet required fire separation or fire mitigation, like improved fire. When you start getting into the fire separations and you start encroaching in those, there's things you can do called fire wall mitigations or things like that, mediation, where you make the walls more thick, various other options. But it's basically a flexibility thing. It allows the developer to come up with, be more flexible. A lot of times you'll see, like, say, golf course communities are often done through a PUD, or resort communities are often PUDs where, the water is the focus and everybody wants to be around that. But it's unusual for us to have such a high. So as you can see, staff supports the request. Long story short, it brings us more in line with the surrounding jurisdictions. Pasco used to, and in fact, if you go to Pasco's site and you look up planned unit development, it still says 35%, but they've recently changed their ordinance, got rid of the 20-acre minimum requirement, and they also got rid of the 35%. They reduced it to 15%. All the surrounding jurisdictions either have no minimum, they just say you got to set it aside, because again, these are always envisioned as kind of a back and forth negotiation between the jurisdiction and the developer. Or they have 15%. So we're a pretty dramatic outlier with a 35% set aside. So staff does recommend approval of this modification to the amendment to the code. And happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for staff. This is Commissioner White.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
How many PUD zones are there in Franklin County right now?
I'm aware of one. And actually, the funny thing about it is you wouldn't know it's PUD. It was filed for whatever, or maybe, is that a PUD or is that a planning site plan?
Rebecca's nodding her head and agreeing. That is a PUD.
It was a PUD, right?
It's a PUD.
Yeah, so there's just the one, but you wouldn't know it looking at it. And that happens sometimes too. The way it's actually developed, I believe it was it Burns Estates? Was it PUD?
No, it was
It's one of those in that
Ivy
vicinity.
Glades.
Ivy Glades, yeah.
Yes.
But if you were to look at it on the ground, you wouldn't really notice that it's a PUD. It was just, I'm not sure why they use that process for it. It just looks like a standard subdivision from what I've seen.
Okay.
So,
But, okay, so, absent sewer and water, PUDs generally would not be available in Franklin County.
what do you mean?
would you have, a property that doesn't have 35% open space for a well and a septic tank?
Now, that's, okay, the open space is, like I said, public property. So what would occur in that type of development is they'd have centralized. So
Okay.
everything would be routed into a centralized, so there'd usually be a tract A and a tract B, say. And tract A is it's a big gigantic septic system, or maybe it's multiple septic tanks or whatever. I don't know how hard that would be to get past, some of the state agencies, but it's theoretically possible, and it's done. And that would just be the same with the water potentially as well. They could have, like, say, 20 wells for 100 units, and each well is connected to 5, and it's sized for 5 units. These are the type of things that happen in a PUD. Because of the specific nature or character of the land, or just because that's how the guy wants to do it, or gal, depending on what that is. So it's possible, but we don't see them very often. And frankly, you don't see them very often in most jurisdictions. Cities, a little bit more so than rural development, that's for sure.
Okay, so the open space is not related to the specific property, but it's related to the entire development, the output of those properties. Okay,
That's correct, yeah.
okay.
And in fact, it can make it so that all of your residential areas just clustered in this small area, like say 20 acres of the 80-acre site for some reason. It allows for that. And then when you have these set asides, you'll get some bonuses. Like maybe you're allowed to make your roads a little narrower or get an increased density. It depends on the specific regulations associated with the PUDs. But the best way to remember them is the rules that are in place, the zoning gets kind of tweaked. You're still limited to the density usually, unless you're doing open space or other bonus systems. But how you arrange them on the property is what gets very flexible. And again, just staff's opinion, to sacrifice over over a third of your property for a PUD is somewhat excessive, and frankly, I've never seen it that high. So that's why we recommend approval of this.
This is Commissioner McMullen. So therefore, it would be harder for a developer to recoup costs because it drives the costs up high, having such a high level of set aside. Is that correct?
That's usually the way it would work out.
Okay, thank you.
And one other thing I need to articulate is in your packet you have a comment from Franklin PUD regarding they're very against this. However, they appear to have misunderstood what we were talking about. They thought that somehow this was going to interfere with their ability to create utilities. They now have the understanding, and we just got an email this evening confirming that they have no issues with this because this basically refers to recreational parkland. It's a big clump. It's not little easements and things like that. So you can basically, even according to them, disregard the email or the comment that they provided, but we didn't get that clarification until this evening.
Mr. Chair, I have another question of staff.
Go ahead.
One of the requirements of the PUD is that it is consistent with adjacent zoning districts. Rather than establishing a fixed amount, it appears that staff has a great deal of flexibility in determining how the PUD feels prior to it coming to the Planning Commission. One of the things that you would want to take into account is the consistency with adjacent zoning districts. So perhaps the best way to handle it is to provide staff with the opportunity to determine the open space requirements as staff is able to determine quite a bit of the requirements for the PUD.
It's not so much as staff determines the requirements. It's in that language that's generally interpreted to refer to, again, if the property is in an RC1 zone and it's 100 acres, then you theoretically have a right to 100 units. That's what they're talking about. It's not, you can't go and put 200 units in there at, basically at a half. Now, the actual units themselves may be setting in that. You have to think about the property as establishing the boundaries and the zoning that the PUD is located in. So you wouldn't be able to put 200 units in a PUD in an RC1 zone on 100 acres. You would still be only allowed to put in 100. So that's that comparison. Again, this open space refers to common area that is utilized at a minimum by the entirety of the neighborhood or the subdivision being put in. It's not individual lot control. It's not accesses. And however, it could be, for example, a boat launch area. And, so it's got the, little like park to access. And it's an open common boat launch. That square footage plus the gazebo and these types of things, that could be that's the stuff that's negotiable. What are we doing with this open space? Is it just natural? Do we want you to put in some playground equipment? Those kinds of things, those are the things that are discussions, and those are negotiable. But staff getting into, this guy put in 15, it's a potentiality, but it would really require us to completely rewrite our code on PUD to accommodate that type of a process.
Okay, I am concerned that the section on PUDs says that the PUD needs to be consistent with adjacent zoning districts.
That just means, again, that's the idea that if I'm surrounded by RC1 and RC5, I cannot build this. I can't start screwing around and thinking that I can go at an RS20 density.
Okay.
That's what that really refers to.
Thank you.
So this is the chair speaking. So basically, Derek, you're saying that 35% open space is really half of that is wasted.
I can't say that half of it's wasted. People take a different value with regard to open space. And in fact, houses, now this is about a 10-year-old study, but houses that are built next door to parks, in fact, have a 20% market value increase. Pretty consistently. However, it's more a matter that we're, again, when you're a developer, the number of lots that you can acquire and to require that 30% of your property, a third of it, be set aside, that's pretty excessive. The question then arises, well, what do you get in return? And for that set aside. So finally, when you reduce that acreage, it can actually lower the costs of the units, whereas at 35%, it's going to be hard that increases the cost, and Kent kind of started talking to that too. Can't say that half of it's wasted. It's just a lot, and like I said, it's not consistent with the surrounding jurisdictions. And like I said, I've seen 20%. I've never seen 35.
Okay.
So this is partly, an attempt by staff as well. Why I'm so supportive of it is to start streamlining and getting our codes more in line with other jurisdictions.
Okay. Any more comments on that? If so, not,
Yes, I have a comment. Just a question for Derek. How do you compare, say, the set aside and say a common area in a development? How does that occur? Like development, like say Goose Hollow, it has, let's say, some unusable part of the development that is set aside as a common area. Is that a private decision by the developer to create that?
In that specific case, if I recall correctly, yes. That's just again, a developer has a right to a maximum density, but they have no obligation to achieve that. So they can set aside open space as they see fit. They go through a PUD process. It allows them to kind of like do other weird things, like I said, like shove all the houses in one side of the property if they wanted to, theoretically. Now you do that, you're probably going to end up with at least 35% open space, maybe even more. But it's not a requirement. 15%, again, we're talking about the requirements, not they can, developer could set aside 75% of his property if that's what he wants to do. And that, but the key is that this is not, you know, like really big lots in a subdivision, which are privately controlled by the homeowner. These are common areas that are at a minimum accessible to the people in the neighborhood, the people that are in that subdivision. It could be open to the public at large, but quite often they're not. It's basically an exclusive right use for the residents in that neighborhood.
So that sounds like it's more of a Goose Hollow example would be more of a creative way that the developer goes about putting together the development on his own volition, rather than, like you say, you know, jamming a bunch of lots into one corner. By that they're compelled to do that rather than voluntary.
Like I said, I don't believe Goose Hollow is a PUD, so I'd have to go back and look at specifically the whys and whats, but I believe that was just a developer's choice. In Spokane area, there's a builder called Greenstone Builder. He often builds subdivisions and sets aside large portions of the property for common areas because that's his style of building. But that's, again, those common areas are generally for the exclusive use of the residents of that subdivision. It's kind of the perk they're paying for, you know. It's not open to the public, like a public boat launch is or something like that. So,
to me, the common area scenario is more in a townhouse or a condominium setting.
That's where you more commonly see it. But yeah, but I've seen it in single family quite often.
Thanks.
We don't build to those densities around here very much, though.
Right. Thank you.
any more comments?
Well, I have one more question, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Link. So in such a situation, obviously we would want to avoid deterioration of that common area. And there are provisions in the ordinance to require a homeowners association. I assume that that's what would happen in these types of situations, since this is such a unique building situation.
Yeah, I'm not aware again of a PUD with a developed open space. Natural open space is a little looser because it just does what it does, and as long as somebody's watering it. But I'm not aware of a single. You always have to, and it's a maintenance fee. Usually, it's something that's required from the residents when they move in. They pay a maintenance fee, and those things are maintained to the point of maybe even the front yards. You know, I mean, there's all sorts of things, but again, it's something that when you purchase or you lease or you move into that unit, you know you're going to be paying this, and this is what it goes towards. So, yeah, that's why in our PUD we require an HOA, is because we have these common areas that got to be maintained or they lose their value and or become a detriment to the residents, you know. So, that's why, yeah, we're not making a recommendation to remove that aspect.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I'll move to have the applicant speak if he wishes.
Yes, we would. So I figure I'd start with just the basic, from a development perspective, like what is open space? Open space could be parks, could be just a native area, could be a hillside, could be trails, ball fields. Those are examples of open space. Open space, there's individual lots that people buy, put their home on, that's their property. The open space is not connected to that. It's its own, typically it's a tract or piece of parcel that the homeowners association owns. And so that's it. Why, what are the benefits the developer looks at doing a PUD? Some of the basic benefits, if you have some unusable land, for example, if you have wetlands that compromise a significant portion of it, you could say, well, I got 100 acres, 30 of that's in wetlands. I can develop 70 of it and max that, get that 100 lot density. Say you're doing, it's an RC1 zoning, the pretty easy math. So you're allowed 100 units because of your gross acreage, and you're going to put that wetland in open space, and so it allows you to creatively develop that property. And so that's the most functional way you see PUDs when you have some interesting terrain to deal with. Another way to do it, another way to consider it is if a developer wants to do private streets, private infrastructure. He doesn't want to build the county's road standards. He wants to do a smaller road, a simpler concept that the homeowners association is going to provide or maintain. PUD allows for that. And the open space is that trade-off. The 35% open space as it stands now, you can just do the simple math. You have a 100-acre site. You're going to lose, like Derek said, 20% is a reasonable rule of thumb that's going to be lost to right away. So now you got 20 acres to roads. So now you have 80 acres of developable land. We'll take 35 acres off of that. Now you're left with 45 acres. So it doesn't pencil out. There's not a single development that I know of in the county that has developed a PUD to these standards. Ivy Glades is the only example of a PUD. And while everybody was talking, I just went on the assessor's website. 5% open space is what I just calced, is what Ivy Glades set aside for open space. Just look at an aerial. There's a little strip down the middle of it. It's about 3 acres. The site's about 63 in total. So Ivy Glades is a PUD. It's private roads, but they did not set aside 35% open space. It was actually 5%. So it's just the way the code's written, nobody's going to use it. We're trying to make it so we, from development perspective, it was 15%. We could actually use this as a tool to develop property. The concern about Commissioner Links, your concern about consistency with the adjacent zoning districts. The good thing about a PUD, it's kind of similar to a conditional use permit. You can't just say, I'm going to do a PUD and this is what I want. It goes in front of the planning commission. You have the final say. If someone proposes something that doesn't fit, you absolutely deny it or condition it appropriately. It's like Derek explains, the negotiation. But the consistency with zoning, the only consistency that's guaranteed with the way the code's written right now is density. So as the site zone, for example, RC1, because that's easy math, if you have a 100-acre site and it's zoned RC1, minimum 1 acre, the most lots you can develop is 100 units. Okay. Now the size, shape, setbacks, those are all scripted variables as the code exists right now. Those are the trade-offs. So that's the only consistency you'll get is density. But everything else is open for creativity. And again, it goes through the public process for that reason. To your comment about deterioration of open space, that's a great question. I don't believe it's scripted in the code, but I imagine if the PUD is brought before the planning commission, staff would require that as a condition of approval, that the HOA, as a condition of plat approval, that there's a recorded maintenance agreement for open space. That's typically what we do for that. So County reviews that, and the HOA, the maintenance agreement is recorded, so everybody understands who's paying for it, what the fees are, and some agencies are even going so far as if the HOA fails and dissolves, there's a reserve plan already built in of how the county is going to pick it up, or a funding mechanism that the county can leverage against those residents. So that's a good question, and that's how that would be taken care of. And it's, again, the reference to the local jurisdictions, I think, is a valid point. And the fact that nobody's using this code, and we see an opportunity to potentially use it, and 15% is reasonable. So happy to answer any other questions. But that's all I had.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Caleb? Any other questions, any comments? Do we have, hearing none, do we have anyone opponent speaking against changing the code?
No, we don't have anybody. In fact, Mr. Hills is already logged off. So,
Okay.
yeah, I don't think anybody's there.
Does staff have any final comments?
Nope.
Any more clarification that's needed?
Mr. Chair, I do have a question for the applicant. This is Mr. Lloyd. So where do you see these types of developments occurring?
That's a great question. I can't speak to specific locations because it's not public record yet. But if you can imagine some hillside development, that would be a practical place for it.
Okay. Any other besides hillside development or?
No, so if there's hillside development, there's unusable land like wetlands, that would be it. But as far as saying this is a specific area, I'm not at liberty to discuss that.
Okay.
I can tell you though that there is an area that we've identified that would benefit from this as a potential option. And another reason why you want to look at this from a developer's perspective is it gives you options. So when you develop a piece of property, you don't want to say, I can make this work if only this thing works. You want to have like 5 or 6 things backed up to that. Say, if I get pigeonholed on this, I can pivot and go here. And so the PUD gives you that flexibility. And you can imagine, when you're investing that kind of money, to have more options to pivot to, you definitely want to take advantage of this. And the PUD, with this reasonable open space, gives you that other option.
Well, that's where you're locating a development in an area that is largely large lots. You can make the development look like one of the adjacent large lots by using a PUD. Not making it look so much different than the existing neighborhood.
That's a good question. Yeah, you absolutely could. There's no requirement to do that, but another thing that's typically done is buffering. So you'll do the outer lot to kind of match what they're abutting, and then you could scale it into smaller lots to the interior, so the adjacent neighbors that are backing up to it aren't backing up to, for an extreme example, 1 acre lot versus townhomes or duplex units. They're backing up to like properties. So there aren't as much constraints. It's an open ticket. The way the code is written right now, it's you propose anything, it's on the table, and we work together to get it. We're just saying we want this to be usable. If you make the open space 15%, we can actually use the PUD. Or at least have it a considerable option. Right now, it's a no option. It doesn't make any sense to use a PUD with that kind of land take. So in a sense, it's a useless code.
Thank you.
Any other final comments? Then I'll close the public portion of TC 20-02. Any discussion amongst the planning commission prior to our entertaining a motion? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
There is a suggested motion on page 9 of 51.
What page?
9 of 51, or the black number is 4, but the red number is 9 of 51. The page just before the quick notes APA document.
This is Commissioner McMullen. I would move that the Planning Commission adopt the findings of fact as contained in the staff report and recommend approval of the proposed amendment of Chapter 17.58 Planned Unit Development, PUD, based on the findings.
So based on the finding of facts and conclusions, I apologize, I should have said that. If that is acceptable.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner McCollum and second by Commissioner Corrales that we forward to the Board of Commissioners a recommendation of approval for TC 2020-02 within the suggested motion, which I can read that again. I move Planning Commission adopt the findings facts as contained in the staff report and recommend approval of the proposed amendments of Chapter 17.58 Plan Unit Development based on the findings. Is there any facts or anything in there that needs to be mentioned? I guess so. I'll call for a roll call vote then.
Claude Parrott,
Yes.
Mike Vincent,
Yes.
Mike Corrales,
Yes.
Roger Link,
Yes.
Kent McMullen.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the motion is approved.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Caleb. Thank you all. Is there
Thank you,
anything
everyone.
that we need to go over before we adjourn?
The May 4th meeting is going to be a lot of things. We have 4 CUPs and hopefully the final action or recommendation regarding the UGA expansion request and comp plan amendment. It's going to be, so, I don't know that we have really two controversial CUPs, but we've got a request to submit or to basically add fueling pumps to a existing mini mart up in Basin City. However, we appear to have conflicts in the code regarding that. We'll get into more of that at the meeting. We have a service dog training facility. It's not open to the public or kennel. It's not going to be for just like the Sagemore kennels. That's a public. Anybody can bring their dog in. This is not like that. This is a facility that is for training service animals for veterans and first responders. So they would also be kenneling animals as well. But again, those kenneling would only be for as they proposed. Anyway, so there's that one. An event center out in the AP 20 so it's not in Clark's edition. And then a request where we have a pre-existing storage building in the donut hole. Due to the unique orientation of the property and things like that, they're requesting that they be allowed to replace that with a larger storage building. But because of the fact that it's a CUP, it triggers a CUP because it's just a really weird situation. It's the end of a private access drive and things like that. So you'll see that. So those 4 items. Like I said, I don't see a lot of controversy involving these, but we'll see what happens. And then, as I said, the UGA, I'm thinking of putting the UGA as the first agenda item so that we can move through that and see where it goes from there. But and then following that, I think what I would like to do at that meeting, and this is a request going to the 3 bylaw folks, I would like to bring the final draft of the bylaws to the commission for them to have it at that meeting. Not so much that we'd be discussing it, just to introduce it to them. Give them time to look those over and then set a workshop, or we'll discuss whether we want to have a workshop or how we want to work it at that meeting, but set that for the June Planning Commission meeting to hopefully adopt the new bylaws. We still I got the newest version from you, Commissioner Lank. I will forward those over to Ms. Johnston tomorrow. So
Okay,
I got those to start reviewing. And that's it from staff, unless you guys have questions.
So, do we start at 7 o'clock next month?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry again about the whole 637 confusion there. I was thinking of the stuff in May, and I just
And it's going to be the first week of the month.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe we need to tie it to the time change as opposed to.
Yeah. Now there's a thought.
Yeah.
Okay, then I will adjourn the meeting.
Yeah.
At 8:33. Everyone have a good week.
Thank
All
you,
right.
you too.
Yeah. You
Thank
too.
you. Don't get blown away.
Thank you, bud.